Mini episode 1191 of the FDH Lounge is brought to you by Sportsology, delivering unconventional columns and webcasts about sports, TV, music, movies, and more. Follow them on the web at sportsology.com.
The FDH Lounge. You'll want to schedule your life around it.
A long time ago, on a gloomy, wet Cleveland spring night, two men stand alone amidst the late-night drizzle. Their voices echo across the vacant station parking lot as they debate the merits of the great American radio show that have been missing for far too long. On that night, an idea was born. That idea became the FDH Lounge. Welcome to the FDH Lounge.
Hello and welcome to FDH Lounge mini episode 1191, part of our FDH Lounge Look Back, Look Ahead series with the 2010s and 2020s. This is FDH Managing Partner Rick Morris here with our examination of MLB during these time periods. We've got our top players of the 2010s and top projected players of the 2020s and most important storylines of each decade as well. We start with our top 5 players of the 2010s. Number 5, Madison Bumgarner. Number 4, Justin Verlander. Number 3, Max Scherzer. Number 2, Clayton Kershaw. Number 1, Mike Trout. And here's our honorable mention: Miguel Cabrera, Buster Posey, Chris Sale, Paul Goldschmidt, and Zach Greinke. Here's how we project the 2020s. Number 5, Mookie Betts. Number 4, Juan Soto. Number 3, Francisco Lindor. Number 2, Cody Bellinger. Number 1, Mike Trout. And here's our honorable mention: Walker Buehler, Garrett Cole, Christian Yelich, Alex Bregman, and Ronald Acuna Jr. Here's our top 5 storylines of the 2010s. Number 5, the Giants locked up team of the decade halfway through and then promptly fell off. But it was an amazing run while it lasted, with their first World Series title since 1954 and their first in San Francisco in 2010, followed up by championships 2 and 4 years later. Madison Bumgarner established himself as one of the most clutch aces of all time, while Buster Posey took the torch from Derek Jeter as the game's most recent Mr. October. But the rest of the roster was solid but not spectacular in these years, a testament to the incredible managing of Bruce Bochy. Number 4, collusion or efficiency, you be the judge. Until the offseason of 2019-2020, the market saw a string of the coldest financial winters since the heyday of Peter Ueberroth. But this time there was no illegal memo necessary, as groupthink led teams to prioritize younger, cheaper players over those perceived in the cold light of analytics as being overvalued. One of the driving questions of the next decade will be whether the relative liberalization that preceded the 2020 season was an exception to the rule or the end of a market correction. Number 3, analytics routed aesthetics. It's quaint to remember a time when Moneyball was just a controversial concept, because today it's Billy Bean's world and we're all just living in it. At the same time, though, the pursuit of loft has led to a spike in the dreaded 3 true outcomes across the board. Shifting has taken away huge swaths of the field of play, and the shuffling of power arms in the late innings has caused games to last longer than ever before. However ham-handedly, baseball is addressing the latter issue in 2020 with the elimination of one-batter appearances for relievers, but the problem of efficiency sucking drama out of the game will approach crisis levels as the millennials, with the shortest attention span in human history, move even more to the forefront of society. Number 2, tanking worked. The Cubs and Astros flirted with historic lows in the first half of the decade, but won World Series in 2016 and 2017 respectively, and were among the game's great powerhouses during that stretch. Atlanta also copied the playbook and stands currently as 2-time defending NL East champions, with arguably the best base of young players in the game today. Combined with the aforementioned analytics approach, tankers aren't even pretending to spend money, thus heightening tensions with the union. Nobody likes tanking, but until the incentives to do so are eliminated, it will always be around. Number 1, like hockey, baseball is now in a silo consumed primarily by the hardcores. National ratings continue to plummet. Local ratings, especially in stronger markets, remain strong, but that's really no different than where the NHL stands. The best players aren't well known in the mainstream, even Mike Trout, who is quite possibly the best hitter of the last 50 years. Given the patience and appreciation for nuances that the game demands, the downward trend of the game's popularity may be irreversible in today's society, which would be a shame. and it might be lower still were it not for the fact that the collective relevance of NFL, NBA, and NHL teams in the New York City market is at an all-time low. And here's our look ahead to the 2020s. Number 5. The middle-class squeeze that defines today's economics is not a sustainable way forward. At any given point in time, the vast majority of players in the game will fit into the fat part of the bell curve, with highly paid franchise players in one small group and low-paid youngsters in another. As such, they're not going to sit still for a system that generally works only for the highest paid, and actually not even those stars for much of the late 2010s. This could lead to labor unrest or possibly a civil war type scenario in which the middle class throws the big boys under the bus in search of a fairer deal for all from the owners. Number 4. If there's any hope left for baseball to reverse its decline in societal interest, it's now or never. Optimistically, one could say that society is splintering into disparate interests all over the board, so in the world we're moving into, there's no shame in being a significant niche. But that status flies in the very face of how the game sees itself, and there's inevitably less money attached by sponsors and other power brokers to settling for occupying a large silo. Number 3. The new frontiers of analytics, along with further changes to the ball, may transform the game as much in the 10 years as they did in the last 10. In 2010, spin rate, loft radius, and barrels were still concepts yet to reach the masses, and the cover of the ball had yet to be altered, whatever the reasons for that were. While it looks much the same to the casual fan, MLB is changing rapidly due to these and other factors, and as we covered earlier, rarely for the better aesthetically. The inevitable changes in the next 10 may exacerbate this trend unless the powers that be become uncharacteristically proactive. Number 2. Business battles loom all around. Currently, Rob Manfred has thrown down the gauntlet at the minor leagues, attempting to dictate a reorganization that will put many teams out of business. And anger continues to simmer in the union at the tight labor market of recent off-seasons, leading to the biggest spike in strike speculation in almost 20 years. At that time, the aftermath of 9/11 shamed the players and owners into avoiding the labor Armageddon that had loomed since the shutdown of 1994-95 had failed to solve anything. In the last 2 decades, MLB adopted a soft cap that many teams saw as toothless until recent years, when behemoths like the Yankees, Red Sox, and Dodgers curtailed spending in order to avoid large financial penalties. Now that the union is staring at a much harder de facto cap, they've grown far more militant. We'll have to see in 2021 just how heavy the echoes of 1981 and 1994 are in the air. Number 1. The Astros scandal is the biggest mainstream story that baseball has had in many years, sadly, and the revelation of the reach of the cheating among their players and other teams will have a lot to say about how this decade unfolds. Just to break kayfabe for a moment, the cheating scandal was actually 5th on our list of impactful stories for the next decade, before the week that shook baseball to its core, with the dismissal of 3 managers and 1 GM, along with the other discipline imposed by MLB and the explosion of rumors about the exact nature of what was done. 100 years after the game had to deal with the Black Sox scandal, another one that threatens the integrity of the game has come along and posed a matter even more serious than the steroid controversy of the 2000s. As we've outlined, baseball faces an extraordinary matrix of challenges in the next decade, and in order to be better off in 2030 than they are now, they'll have to exhibit the kind of strong and rational leadership that has eluded them for the last 4 decades plus, and get a lot of luck. But none of these challenges are bigger than this one. If the outcomes of games can't be trusted, then the hardcore of fans that will remain will dwindle, and the sport will be in a true crisis. Like other major sports, the emergence of daily fantasy sports has served as a gateway drug to the embrace of full-on gambling because, to the owners, there's way too much money there to be discarded for mere moral reasons. But the irony is that gambling won't be a life raft if the outcomes are in doubt. Think about it. In 100 years, the game has traveled from being corrupted by gambling to potentially too impure for the gamblers to trust. What a sad commentary. Thank you for joining us for this mini episode of the FDH Lounge.